Hey guys, welcome back to Splints and Whiskey. Sam Patrick here, mixing it up a little bit today in light of certain conversations, experiences, and life journeys I've been on recently. I realized it might be time just for a little one-on-one fireside chat between you and I. Um, I would steal a certain individual's term of Friday field notes. Shout out to that guy. Let him know that he got a call out. I'm not going to mention him by name because he wants to remain behind the scenes. At this point, I'm going to get you, bud. You're going to come. You're going to sit right here and we're going to talk. Um, I'm not going to steal the Friday field notes moniker due to the fact that that belongs to him. But when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about with you guys, I realized that I've had quite the ability to be the professional fly on the wall or the unintentional wallflower my entire career, getting some pretty significant access and placement around some colossuses of multiple communities and sitting in rooms that I did not need to physically be in because I was not part of the actual planning or briefing process that was going on. But since I had the key card to get in and I could learn, I went and sat there. So I'm going to try and keep my brain on track and wax poetically for you all and have a relatively functional stream of consciousness discussion on kind of some of the things that I've been chewing over lately. I just got back from the Special Operations Medical Association's conference that went on last week. Fun fact: if you're a cool guy, you went to that one instead of Soft Week. So I'll throw the challenge out there to people next year to come to the right show. Well, to be fair, it's more than a show; it's a massive collaboration event for our Special Operations medical community. It's supposed to be focused on the medics. We'll get to that in a minute. It was good. It was good focused on the medics. Alex Merkel, you did a phenomenal job, my guy. Shout out to you. But there are some things I've been processing and I would like to figure out solutions for. So, did not do a good job prepping for this one. I kind of wanted it just to be free flow and keep it within time and see what thoughts and ideas come out of it. And essentially, it really should be a call to action, perhaps a wake up call or just an identification of, hey, we need to polish up on some things and go from there. Yeah, so let's see where it goes. Business stuff. I got to throw out the shout out to our primary sponsor, so Life Autonomous Care Consultants. If you're looking for any medical procurement or supplies or anything else, simulations, anything like that, please reach out to LACC. The website is LACCINC as Inc. Lima Alpha Charlie India November Charlie.com. Yeah, they can go ahead and help you out with anything you're trying to do in the medical realm, especially when it comes to procuring the gear you need. All right, since they power us, we'll give them all the love. All right, where we're gonna go with this. So I jotted down a couple notes that are right here on my screen. Yep. And I'll just run down them and see what they do. So I put down operational art, war is war, combined arms, integrative joint staff, de-silo, empower medics, enhance medical leader development, and the Joint Special Operations Planning course. So one of my favorite things to do when I go to conferences, and I just went to AMSUS last month, I think, as well, there's a question that I ask, and it's a very simple one, and I'm going to throw this out there to all of our military listeners. And to be fair, for the people on the civil side, it's not a bad document to look at if you're looking to create a colossal health service and support framework. So JP 4-02. I'll give the joint staff some love. And you know why I focus on joint pubs and joint doctrine is in the fact that when I was at SOMA today, or yesterday, apologies, you know what I saw? It was a joint conference. And when I see things that are in the joint space, we need to speak and focus on joint doctrine, especially at the strategic level. At the ground level tactical unit, or the end user, so your traditional medic and all this other stuff, yeah, you may not need to know what it particularly is, but you should at least know where it is on the bookshelf, because when you enter a joint planning space in the military, you need to be able to speak the language of the joint staff. The last note that I threw out on my little notepad here, the Joint Special Operations Planning course given down at the JSAL, the Joint Special Operations University. I need to give a huge shout out to all the staff down there. When I went through, excuse me, at the end of my active duty career, to be honest, right as I was leaving SOF and transitioning over to full-time guard work, I went through that course and I realized that we are failing our mid-level. We'll go say if you're about to touch staff anywhere, and to be fair, if you have anything to do with planning, which I hate to say it, all of us do, is the most valuable course to go through, because it teaches you actually what planning looks like outside of the medical community. You get intimately familiar with the joint planning process. I want to give a shout out to Andy Milburn. He just published a book. I highly recommend it. He gets to read it to you if you like to listen to the King's English for a few hours. He was our task force commander that we had to brief while we were there, and some of the insights that he shared along with the rest of the staff made me realize that on the medical side of things, we are hurting ourselves through just, for lack of a better term, ignorance, and the fact that we have gotten a little too comfortable being a special staff element. So for those who are not familiar with how the military works, you have your primary staff functions, which are your J1 through 9, which all have primary functions, which the commanders are usually pretty intimately aware of what their actual functions are. They have a seat at the table all the time. And then you have your special staff, which to me, I joke, again, this is a joke, but there's kernels of truth in every joke. The special staff is where all the people hang out around the table that the commander doesn't really know what they do and blindly trusts that when they say it's good, he's like, roger that, good to go. And I've realized that a lot of what I'm seeing on the operational and strategic medical planning side of things is that blind trust has not allowed us to hold our medical leadership and planners accountable. And when stuff does go sideways, the people who are looking at it truly don't have a grasp or understanding of why it went sideways. And this applies all over the space: the civil space, military space, commercial space, private sector. When you have key stakeholders in a contingency level or a readiness aspect that I'll say the CEO, the primary boss doesn't have a good understanding of what we do, we have to kind of like buck up and realize, like, no, we have to justify who we are, what we do, and what we can bring to the fight. Another guy I ran into at SOMA, I'll give a shout out to Steve Adamson from Australia. I talked to Steve for a bit while we were at the show, and he probably set up the event that was the most formative to me to realize, like, hey, our medical silo that we've put ourselves in is really hurting us. So Steve, phenomenal fella from down under. Sorry, apologies to my Aussie friends. I'll never do that again. Was an exchange officer to the First Corps over up here at Fort Lewis. He created a prolonged field care experiment that also Caleb Twilliger helped execute. Shout out, Caleb. Hope you're doing all right, mate. Out in Yakima Training Center, essentially our goal was to stress out a conventional military unit. It was 8-1 Cav at the time that was actually commanded by Colonel Resmondo, who used to be a platoon leader and a troop commander in my first unit. So huge shout out to them. It's great to see you out there. But what we did is we took a cavalry troop and we basically gave them a scenario where they took, I believe, 12 to 20 casualties. Essentially, we dropped indirect fire, so on a convoy of replacements coming to the troop. And what I saw from that was the most important people to the success of that event were actually the non-medical leaders. I can't remember if it was Bravo or Charlie Troop we were working with. There was a first sergeant there that was the sole reason that they were not completely crippled. The other troop had there was a couple staff sergeants who stepped up big time and filled the role. What I did see was a complete kind of disregard for the inject, to the point one individual in a position of leadership came to us, and the XCON, the exercise control guys, the OCTs, observer control trainers, it's like, hey, can we cancel this inject so we can get back to the mission? And when I heard that, I saw red. Fortunately, I was able to walk away and take a couple deep breaths, because that is how we have been training medicine at the non-medical level. Like at the medical level, like clinician level, like when we do just doing medic things, like, hey, it's not as bad as that. But when you do casualty injects in the actual space, the operational space, the joint space, whatever you want to call it, the combined arm space, people are just like, I don't want to do this. And when I see that, and I go to conferences like AMSUS or MHSRS or SOMA, and I don't see anybody from the 3 shop, anybody from fires, anybody from J4, S4, logistics, so operations, logistics, planning, there are no people from outside medical at these shows or conferences trying to figure out how they can better integrate with us. Then, when I go back and look around the offices of various places of the wolves I've gotten to hold up while standing in the corner, we don't integrate with those sections as well as we should. For instance, I'm going to throw acronyms out there. I'll try to explain them all as I go. When you look at a traditional Army medical platoon, and since I'm Army, we'll focus on this, but I'm sure it translates across the board. Army medical platoon and an infantry battalion, or cavalry battalion, or squadron, or anybody who is in the combat arms section, or realm of things. The platoon has 3 key leaders, 4. You have your platoon sergeant. You have your medo, who's usually that's oftentimes the PL, the medical officer, who's a non-clinician. You have a PA, physician's assistant, and then you have a physician, or what we call a surgeon in the Army. That's not actually a traditional surgeon. It's more of a staff role. So of those 4, usually the PL, the platoon leader, the medical service corps officer is and second lieutenant or first lieutenant, junior officer. Platoon sergeant, sergeant first class, most likely. A lot of times it's a staff sergeant these days because we're not filling roles. Your PA, oftentimes at that level, first lieutenant, maybe a captain. And then your physician, Bob's your uncle on that one, depends on who gets assigned, but most likely it's going to be a captain fresh out of residency. TBIs, hello friends. Fresh out of residency with very little operational experience or planning experience or institutional knowledge or understanding of doctrine. So by the mere rank structure, when someone walks into a medical surgeon cell and a battalion level, the most senior ranking individual there is actually the least experienced when it comes to operational doctrine and planning. And in my personal opinion, I've seen this, the trickle-down effect is they talk to the doc doesn't actually speak doctrine or doesn't understand combined arms or doesn't understand the integration of the joint force, and it has just continued to snowball throughout the entire history of not the entire history, but the throughout my career, I've identified that as a particular failure point, because that second lieutenant who is responsible for the doctrine, responsible for the planning, responsible for going to the 3 shop and being integrated in the planning cycle, also doesn't know enough, nor does he have enough or she have enough experience at that level to be able to advocate for what needs to happen. In my opinion, I think this may be shifting. It's also very different everywhere. The medical planner, the med ops officer, and sorry guys, a little boring, but the operation stuff's important to me as I continue to see failures across the board on operational planning. So we're going to talk about it. That lieutenant should be in the S3 shop, which is the operation shop where the plans and operations guys are. Or by doctrine, Army doctrine, medical falls under sustainment. Why? Because we are sustainers. We support the human capital, which is the human equipment, just like the sustainers support hardware, warfighting material, you get the beans, bullets, and all that other stuff going forward. So the logistics plan and the medical plan are supposed to be nestled into each other very tightly, because guess what? If I'm sending resupply forward, and then when I leave the forward line of troops and I'm dragging stuff backwards, I can recover vehicles and I can recover tissue. So if there's people that need to be moved and I'm pulling log pack logistics packages forward, then I have assets to pull injured people to the rear. During this experiment that I ran with Steve Adamson, or assisted, or kind of was a wallflower again, the Army Medical Capabilities Development and Integration Directorate was also there. I saw this happen in real time. This troop had 20 casualties. They were mission effective. And oh, by the way, they never reported to headquarters that they were combat ineffective because they couldn't maneuver due to the fact that they had all those casualties. Get to that in a minute. But there was an entire engineer convoy that ran right past their assembly area, their Alpha, and I asked the CO and the first sergeant and the XO, I'm like, hey guys, did you think about flagging down that convoy and asking them to bring your casualties to the Roll 2 Charlie Medical Company? And they're like, And I was like, all right, roger that. Made me realize, I should apologize, is that we don't think outside the box enough when it comes to casualties. And when I look at war as war and combined arms and integrated joint staff as notes, it's like, all right, guys, we keep talking large-scale combat operations. Everything's going to hell in a handbasket. Everything's gone sideways. The world is falling. The Navy and the Air Force have been crippled, which I'll get to that in a second because it chaps my ass to think we're going to write off two of the services that carry the biggest punch. Shout out to you guys. That we completely lost train of thought. Neat. But yeah, so we just stay in this little box. If I look at what's coming out of the Combined Training Center, so Fort Irwin, Fort Jackson now, is it not Fort Jackson? Whatever Fort Polk is now, sorry. And then the Hohenfels Training Centers. Like, what is coming out of those about casualty response at the unit level? And that will feed us all the data we need to know on how we can handle LISCO. Because right now, if we're not thinking creatively, thinking outside the box, taking advantage of every piece of mobility we have to enable the commander to maneuver, we're failing as medical planners, providers, tacticians on understanding the problem and recognizing sometimes good enough is going to have to be okay when we're looking at the forecasted future fight. Why I say that? GWAT. Hey man, I'm a GWAT baby, product of the global war on terrorism. And while there was some phenomenal case studies, Ryan Davis, for instance, Ranger Campbell, and the list goes on, of massive, colossal saves that are Herculean efforts, the spinning of millions, if not billions of dollars of assets to make one person live, which the psychological spillover to our warfighters, hey, I'm going to take that hill despite withering fire because, hey, Doc's got us. Hacksaw Ridge, like that's the tradition of the Army medic, is we are going to move mountains to get you out. Get you out. That's the emphasis. Get you out. What is that? That's evacuation. Another thing that absolutely chaps my ass, mates, is this primary plan that prolonged casualty care, delayed evacuation casualty, prolonged field care is going to be a primary planning tool. While we need to train for it, and Rick Caldwell, I dude, love you, my guy. I loved watching you hold court with some junior medics, or younger medics, I should say there. You hit the nail on the head, my dude. Medicine is medicine. The terms prolonged casualty care, delay, like, oh, cool, got it. But at the end of the day, to do all that right, I just need to have a basis of medicine. But when we start throwing terms like that out there, commanders think it's a capability as opposed to an emergency contingency. And why I say this, and I saw it in real time at this experiment with Steve, when we don't empower commanders to understand that if a casualty needs evac, any means possible is fine. Regulate, like, so the medevac system, the medical evacuation system in the Army particularly, is not regulated like the Air Force, but it's semi-regulated. It is when we look at good, better, best, medevac is best. Good, I'll do ground evacuation in a medical asset. Or good, or better, I should say. Good is CASEVAC, any means of conveyance. Get the casualties off the front line to enable the commander freedom of maneuver. And why, circling back, I get so frustrated when I ask people what JP4-02 is, and I get kind of crickets or blank stares or JP404, so that's logistics, sustainment, because it breaks down in very simple language what the Joint Health Service Support priorities of work are. And in operational medicine, like combat medicine, our priorities of work are to remove injured service members who cannot stay in the fight to a point of rehabilitation or recovery, to be rehabbed at the closest point to the forward line of troops, to be sent back to the forward line of troops. While there is clinical aspects and treatment nestled into that, and evacuation, all this other stuff, at the end of the day, our job is to enable combined arms maneuver and return combat power to the commander. If you focus at combat medicine at its core, those two fundamentals, the operational medicine, like just any high threat medicine, that is the goal. When I have an injured service member, it takes X amount of people out of the fight. So here's another fun fact about history. The M16, the 223 round. So what were we using before M16s? The M14, which was chambered with 7.62, which is about 308 for our civilian folks. M16 comes along. It's a 5.56/223 caliber round that is designed to spin, cavitate through the body, and not actually have enough stopping power to truly drop somebody like a 7.62 round did. Why was that? Crickets, answer your question. I'm waiting. Come on, I can't hear you. Call me. Why was that? Because when I maim somebody, when I injure somebody, it takes 4 people out of the fight with them. That's by design. An aid and litter team, a proper aid and litter team, is a 4-person element. So to move a casualty appropriately who is still alive is supposed to take 4 people. So again, this is why, like, war is not, there's a lot of layers to war is war. And understanding that thing. So, all right, now I need to move these people. And you look at Hacksaw Ridge. Why were medics not armed for most of the time? It's because the goal was just, hey, I need you to move casualties. If you're focused on war fighting, you're not going to do your job. You had your aid and litter teams, like they weren't involved with the actual fight. They were going in and pulling people out, Ukraine, you're seeing similar things happen. There's just a significantly increased lethality of fires. Like, you have casualty response extrication teams. On the civilian side of the world, who runs rescue? It's fire departments. If you have a crisis site, or if you're doing a crisis or crowd control, riot control, where are the SWAT guys? They're behind the riot line, because they're the rescue task force. They run in, grab the officer who gets injured if they need it, and they drag them back for treatment. Or they go in and do a quick arrest team to help the riot line. They pull them back. So it all comes down to, if something needs to be taken out of a situation, the only solution for it is, hey, get it out of the situation as quick as possible. We've added layers of medicine, because when we add the layers of medicine, Now that enables us to potentially return combat power to the commander. I was reading a book recently about the Revolutionary War, about the Green Mountain Boys. Shout out to the Vermont National Guard, which I started my career in. I had to nerd out about Ethan Allen, but they were talking about a lot of the casualties that they were receiving during the Revolutionary War. What did they do? They collected them in an improvised hospital, not collated them, like put them in the best conditions possible given the situation. They had a few people attend to them, and they just sat and recovered. And I think that's where we, like, from the global war on terror, we took the ability to do Herculean medical efforts, and we have tried to scale that to the point where we could bring it to the next fight. And I think we're quickly learning that's not possible. I had a chat with somebody, I can't remember who I attributed it to, but before SOMA, about how we are prioritizing the clinician, physician, surgeon, like actual surgeon training and development heavier than we are the medic. And what the consequences of that are we're going to see, like, we're going to try to push surgery far forward. Ask the question, why? Yes, we can save American service member lives like we did in the GWAP, but on a operational logistics sustainment like maneuver sense, it doesn't truly make sense to try and push surgery that far forward, because if someone honestly needs rapid damage control surgery that early, we need to review what our legitimate combat crisis standards of care are. Being a special operations guy most of my career, like, there's obviously nuanced differences to, all right, if I'm putting a team deep behind enemy territory, do we want to have this asset, blah, blah, blah. But still, I'm still putting this asset, which is not a war-fighting asset, far forward in a place that it could easily compromise, it could easily roll the primary mission that that element is there for. Actually, I sat in on a vignette, and I was, of course, the asshole in the room. I'm like, hey, what's the commander's intent? That's another thing we need to understand in military medicine. If we're truly going to focus on this LISCO specter that's looming over our shoulder that we keep telling us is going to happen, self-fulfilling prophecies can become true if we just keep believing in it. We need to realize, like, casualties are a contingency. I say this to police officers, I say this to everybody, like, and a casualty happens, that is a contingency nestled in the primary plan. When you look at, all right, go to GSOPSI, learn about branch plans, learn about friggin' fragos, all these other things that can come out of planning. Like, casualties are a contingency and they're a con plan. And if you don't look at them as a con plan, even as medical, like as medical leaders, medical providers, we have to look at those casualties. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, it's kind of crude, not crude, it's kind of just morbid. We have to look at those casualties in the overall operational plan. And when we are not having our leaders sit at the table for the operational planning that occurs before we write an Annex Q, which is if you don't know what that is, and you're in the joint planning space, that's the health service support annex to the operational plan. In the Army health system, our annex is nestled under sustainment, or it's an appendix under sustainment, so I can't reference the numbers and letters because I don't regurgitate doctrine that well, but I could find it in 5 minutes or less. And why the Army health system important? Because technically the J4, the sustainment guys, own the medical plan. We in medical like to think we own it. Like, no, to be fair, the commander owns the plan. We do a piss poor job educating the commander on the limitations in our plans or the limitations of the assets we try to push forward. I mentioned crisis standards of care. This has come up a few times in chats I've had. Military medicine in a large-scale combat operation or an active combined arms maneuver situation where there's potential for high lethality of fires and multiple casualties, we need to have a crisis standard of care for that. We have it nestled in some MASCAL clinical practice guidelines. But at the end of the day, and this is just cold hard truth of war fighting, we need to understand what is, and this is a question to the commander, what are our acceptable losses? Because you know how what acceptable losses correlate back to? It's not so much, yes, it's combat power, but ultimately, when we look at mass casualty war fighting functions, when we have large numbers of casualties, it changes strategic level domestic optics of what we're doing. Afghanistan, Iraq, it became irrelevant to the American people because no service members were dying. Like, were people getting hurt? Absolutely. But there wasn't actual easy statistics just pointing like, oh, this is Vietnam. Hey, why are American service members dying at the rate they are, and for what? Had World War II drug on and we didn't come up with the nuclear solution for the Pacific, who knows how long the U.S., like the domestic population in the U.S. would have tolerated the meat grinder that would have been taking Japan by ground. Like, would it have become necessary? Would we have like negotiated a semi-conditional surrender? It's stuff we don't know because, hey, history is what it is. But what I do know from reviewing relatively recent conflict is the American people do not have an appetite for a meat grinder. So, thus, that needs some serious national command authority guidance. Like, again, that's not coming from DOD, and that's civilians, appointed civilians, that should be giving us that guidance. Yeah, love this stream of consciousness, don't you? So what I'm trying to say, going back to it, is medically, and I when I go to these shows and we do not have non-medical planners there to tell us we're, for lack of a term, fucked up. Like, I need the S3 I need the J5, I need all the plan guys to come down to medical, like, hey, your plan sucks. Come to the actual planning cell and we'll figure this shit out. And this goes back to my observations of Army medical. This is not across the board. These are just my own anecdotal observations. Where have I always found the medical officer for a freaking infantry battalion, sitting in his Humvee on the JCR, the little computer, beep boop boop, and the roll one, the aid station, the main aid station, the forward aid station, they're always dislocated from anybody. I found one forward aid station on the side of a main supply route, guarded by the battalion scouts, which, all right, let's peel that one back here. All right, I'm going to put a vulnerable asset with a tent on a main supply route. Again, main supply route, which is a major means of conveyance for friendly and enemy, and probably has drones floating over it like a turd. I'm going to take your battalion scouts, which is a singular platoon inside of an infantry battalion that's designed to provide recon and eyes for the commander, and I'm going to make them sit on this allegedly force generating or force regenerating spot on the earth. And when I asked the key leadership that was there, it was because we don't want to be next to our command post because they always get blown up. Okay. And of course, my face probably looked the way it did. I was like, all right, so here's the deal. You don't want to be next to the most likely casualty producing site in your formation, where the most important decision makers for your formation are, who could probably use the fastest casualty response, to ensure that they can stay in the fight and the unit, the battalion, can remain combat effective. It just made me realize that, I'm going to swear here, like, that we're fucking clueless on how combined arms maneuver is supposed to go. And I'm going to try really hard to not get pissed, but I've been pretty flippin' pissed for years, to be fair. another eye-opening experience from that event with Steve Adamson. And this was just purely fly on the wall, my guy. Like, this is like, for every medic, every leader out there, go to meetings you do not need to be in to learn how other people do their job. Because I went to the medical evacuation combined arms rehearsal at the brigade, Alpha or TAA, which is where the whole brigade staff hangs out. And so medevac combined arms rehearsal, the only non-medical people there were the brigade S1 personnel officer, the brigade support battalion's executive officer, and the brigade command sergeant major. There was no brigade sustainers, there was no brigade fire officers, there was no brigade S3. There was no one sitting at that rehearsal that could say, hey, this is not going to work, because the plan as I was observing it was not going to work. The kicker, though, the kicker for me on this experience was the medevac combined arms rehearsal was first, and then after it became the fires combined arms rehearsal. So the guys who make things go boom. What I didn't quite catch at the time, no, I caught it, I just decided to not get livid over it, was the fact that they had ambulance in ground medevac. The goal is to have forward line of troops, then ambulance exchange points where your forward line of troops, they're organic medevac or CASEVAC, casualty evacuation, just any truck brings casualties to that point. They give them into the other ambulance, and they go back to fighting. That's what ambulance exchange points are designed to return combat power to the forward line of troops. It's not necessarily the best medical treatment, because the best medical treatment is load and go and get to the freaking first site possible. But when I do that, I'm taking my armor off the front line, because usually what happens is in the striker brigades, striker from the forward line of troops brings back to an ambulance at the ambulance exchange point, which is usually an unarmored FLA for frontline ambulance. And then the striker goes back to fighting war or doing high-risk casualty extraction because it's armored. But where I realized that no one had planned together, or at least medical decided, I'm going to throw the ball and I'll throw medicine under the bus. The medical planners did not sit at any table with any other adults, because the ambulance exchange points became target reference points. Like, literally the icon, like they took the little thing that said AXP, they took the paper off and then put TRP on that. For anybody who has actually planned anything in the military, you understand that that is the most frightening thing in the whole fucking world, because a target reference point is a point on the ground that a fire support officer is going to bring the rain. And all I could picture was fire for effect, TRP1. Roger that, fire for effect, TRP1. And that AXP gets leveled because they missed the fact that they were going to call TRP1 shift fire right 2,000, add 500. But in the fog of war, chaos of war, if it sounds like troops are in contact and someone needs to bring the rain, they're going to bring the rain, even with partial information. That's the fog of war. And it just had it highlighted the ignorance of, I know it's a singular event, but I hear stories and I see observations all across the force that continue to reinforce the lack of understanding of how war is supposed to go from medical. So why I say go to courses like the Joint Special Operations Planning course, especially if you're in SOF, it is I think 2 weeks. You get some pre-work that actually opens your aperture on what's supposed to happen. For the time you have, it is the most effective use of time to learn how to plan militarily. You're forced to be the joint staff. You're forced to learn other staff functions. And when you learn the other staff functions, you know how to integrate your plan. So operational art. This is a term that I wish I could remember the lead instructor's name. He's phenomenal. I think it's Buster Marine. Correct me if I'm wrong. But again, give a shout out to JSOW staff. You guys are phenomenal, because you took incredibly complex joint planning process ideas. You jammed it into a two-day course. We planned a pretty impressive operation scenario. And then we I tabletopped it. But operational art was the thing I took away the most. And this is the frustrating part when I hear like how we're kind of talking and planning right now. We're not focusing on operational art. Operational art's a thought process. Operational art is a way of thinking. Operational art is critical thinking, critical problem solving, military decision making process, blah blah blah, all the things. But like what it is the art of the planner. And yes, I understand that no plan survives initial contact. Got it. But when that initial contact happens, guess what happens? You immediately start planning. Like you're reacting, you're planning. Like even if it's the micro tactical level, all right, I'm taking fire from over here. My sensory inputs that I'm collecting from this event, I'm planning what I'm going to do next in the minutia. Very rarely do you just blindly react. You're taking stimulus, you're planning your next move, then you're reacting. Why we train the way we do in the tactical environment is we try to narrow the threshold of the reaction time that can be exported to the operational strategic level as well. So when I keep hearing all these conversations about the next big war, I'm like, all right, cool. We can't possibly plan for every contingency. We can't possibly plan for every con plan kicking off. We can't plan for every op plan kicking off, but we need to make sure our op plans at least they're worth more than the paper they're written on. Had another unique experience in the Korean Peninsula, getting to see behind the curtain on something. And to be fair, it was, I'm out of the military now. It's fucking embarrassing. It was embarrassing. It was the most embarrassing time in my career because when I got to see behind the curtain, it made me realize I was going to lose a lot of friends because of shitty fucking planning. And now that I'm in a position where I can sit here and have a freaking monologue for an hour with you guys and like recognize like, hey, this is bullshit. So love everybody I'm hanging out with SOMA. Love everybody in the community, but this is a call to action to be better. We need to sit at the table with the adults. I know, again, plenty of places do it fine, but from my general observation, we're not doing it well. Like medical needs to have a seat at the table as an integrated planner into the process, not just a special staff member that we do our little Annex Q freaking beep booping in another room. Because guess what you get by being at the table? You get to overhear what the other people are talking about. Like when that medical PL was like, I don't want to be in the CP because blah, blah. Like, hey Holmes, the amount of intelligence and real-time situational awareness that you get by sitting in the right spot that you can then feed to your medical people to make sure that they're ready to go is astronomical. Like, don't expect that little computer terminal to feed you all the data you need. Like, it's already so overwhelming. I've sat on those, it was FBCB2 at the time. Like, the amount of data coming through, like, you can't process it. But I can listen to radios, all these other things, and in a CP where they're all tuned up, I can see the drone feeds, I can see the freaking real-time trackers, and I can listen to what the maneuver guys are trying to do. I can listen to what the sustainers are trying to do. I can see that I have casualties at Alpha Troop. All right, looks like the FSC, the Forward Support Company, is going to push forward to resupply with ammo. Hey, man, they got an LMTV going up. They got 12 casualties. As soon as they drop that pack, we got to throw them on the LMTV. We don't have medics to go with them, but you're going to just beat feet back to the roll 1, roll 2, and we're going to figure it out. I've never seen it happen like that. I'm sure it has happened somewhere. So why I get slightly upset is our shitty operational planning when it comes to integrating health service support operational medicine into the overall combined arms operational plan is what gets people dead. This still happens in training. You roll a freaking LMTV with 20 people on it in a Yakima training center or national training center, and you don't have a good real casualty movement plan, people die because you're delaying it. That's another thing too that I think we need to emphasize and prioritize with the commanders. Like, no, there's no such thing as doctrinal patient hold anywhere. I'll correct that in a second. If a patient needs evacuation, a patient needs evacuation. If you're delaying that evacuation, there's consequences to that, And if the commander is not informed on what those risks are, they can't take moves to integrate other staff to make sure that they have a good tissue movement plan or recovery plan. So we are, by us not informing commanders on how health service and support integrates in the overall plan, we're failing the warfighter and potentially letting them die because we, to be fair, maybe be a degree of we don't know what we don't know. We're uncomfortable in the room. We've been pushed out of too many rooms. But guess what? You know why we get pushed out of rooms? We don't know our own fucking doctrine. Like, doctrine is not end all be all. I got it, 100%. But guess what? Every infantry officer knows what their doctrine is. Every logistics officer knows what their doctrine is, because when they do career development, so the captain's career course for what, an infantry officer, last time I checked, was 6 months, may have changed, I don't know. Medical, what, 4 weeks online, maybe. So there is plenty of ignorance is bliss going on, but ignorance is bliss is what gets people dead. And it pisses me off, and I've seen it time and time again. My own time in the SOF community, like, you know who I got information coming from our customers in their planning cell before anybody else gets, and like I went over my flight leads. I'm like, hey man, this is what they're looking at. I've already kind of ginned up some stuff on my side, and if you guys need to get some early intel, this is probably what's coming down the pipe. And usually 30, 40, 60 minutes later, a warning order would drop, and hey, we already got a little bit of a head start. At least looked at it. And that's the importance of being in the integrated planning cell, like being in the joint operations center, the JOC, having your key staff members in the same place where I can look up at a screen and be like, okay, that's what's going on out there. I'm going to need to start leaning forward to make motions to make sure that I can solve this problem. And that, at the end of the day, is what we are, is problem solvers. We have a very niche problem that we're supposed to focus on, but a lot of times we try to focus on this niche problem that requires so many other people to help us in our own little bubble. And I think as I unpack and unfold some of the things I observed in SOMA, this is a waxing poetically, a stream of consciousness of the past 20 years, 21 years, 22 years, whatever the hell it's been, of observing people coming up with shitty plans, then patting themselves on the back about their shitty plan. I hate to throw this out to the civil space, guys. You guys are just as flipping awful. Like, I am frustrated when I read after action reports that directly contradict what I'm hearing from the people who are on the ground. So, by sugarcoating or claiming success when we should be focusing on improvements, or allowing ourselves to focus on, like, it's fine to focus on the wins, but I'm going to be honest, when I do any sort of after action review, I always leave like, hey, stuff went right. We'll talk about some of that, but at the end of the day, I only have this much time to help you improve. So therefore, we're going to focus on what we need to improve. We do not seem to be doing that well across the entire pre-hospital medical system globally. And I think we need to give our balls a tug, throwing out a Letterkenny reference out there, and be humble. Be able to be humble and recognize, like, hey, this didn't work. We need to have a group discussion, not just us in our little silo, about how this failed and why we need other people's help for success. I've made so many mistakes through my career. So many. I highlight them daily. When I try to teach people, it's like, I'm not perfect. I've made shitty operational plans. To be fair, again, I'm going to throw Ahmad Hawk's name out there. Ahmad Hawk, former Army surgeon, currently working up in Seattle, was one of the most formative people in my career, because he made me realize that some of just the planning ego, the operational ego, the ignorance of capability, the ignorance of the overall problem was enabling certain people to make decisions that A, weren't theirs to make, and B, limited available resources for an individual that could be potentially having the worst day of their life. And it made me realize, like, if I was that guy on the ground bleeding out, would I want this, Would I want the compact economy car, or would I want the luxury car? Use a car rental. And it took me, like, I don't remember, I think it was like 12 or 13, 14 years into my career that I realized, holy shit, my ego, thinking I'm fucking cool guy, never was, thinking that I was cooler than I was, better than I was, could easily result in someone dying unnecessarily because I felt like I was the solution. So that's, I think, my challenge to all of us as I'm running up on time, and I think this might be worthwhile. It's like, hey, first and foremost, we need to get out of our silo. We need to get uncomfortable in environments that we don't particularly speak the language in, like the other warfighting functions. We need to get our medics to think again. Like, we need our medics to think medicine. Like, tactical combat casualty care is an algorithm, a guideline inside of medicine. But at the end of the day, what is it? Medicine. We throw all these other terms: emergency medicine, internal medicine, austere medicine, wilderness medicine. Like, no, what's the common thread between them all is medicine. I don't have solutions. I have ideas, potential solutions, but really at the end of the day, like, we need to change a culture. We need to change a thought process. We need to realize, like, particularly with SOMA, the lack of medic participation in SOMA is infuriating, but we as medics need to blame ourselves as well, because we have a massive onus on that one. For everybody in health service and support across the board, whether it's like fire, like just anybody in a high risk health service and support profession, do not relegate yourselves to irrelevancy by hiding in your little office and planning and coming up with whatever Dungeons and Dragons game you want to try to execute in real life, because if you're not integrating the true decision makers, it ain't gonna go the way you think. And it's gonna cause hiccups, it's gonna cause heartache. And guess what? The moral injury for that, and as someone who has struggled with moral injury because of egotistical decision making, that lands directly on you. And that's what you got to think about when you're in the quiet of your basement and your puffy coat. So, another thing I need on my guys, medics, senior medics, salty dogs, every last one of you who has told me, nah, man, I don't want to come on and have a chat, I'm a behind the scenes guy. I'm not gonna be like, hey, stop. I'm a behind the scenes guy. Behind the scenes guys who have knowledge to share, who don't share it, you're just screwing the next generation, period. Like, we can be puppet masters all day long, but all of us have stuff in here, an antidote that may hit with the next generation that's going to change the world. So we all need to realize that doing something like this, it's not egotistical, it's not prideful. I hate looking at my face. That's why I don't ever do it. It's like, but I have lessons learned. I have mistakes that I've made that I could potentially share that may prevent somebody else from doing it. And you know what? That might mean that some kid grows up with a dad or a mom for the rest of their life, as opposed to having a picture on the fucking mantle. So, all right, guys. It was fun. We went down some rabbit holes. We talked about some shit. I have a lot more ideas that I'm going to continue to action. But right now, for all my health service support, medical folks, all through the entire enterprise of defense, civil defense, domestic response, time to get out of our offices and get uncomfortable in places we don't know, learn the vernacular, and let's start actually integrating in a manner that's going to ensure that when this next big war, I have a hard time seeing it happen because we're riding off the complete lethality fires of the United States Navy and the United States Air Force, which has a serious punch that we keep discounting. Sidebar. The next big war is going to require all hands on deck on all fronts, from forward line of troops to the domestic health system that's going to receive a massive influx of patients if we go to this mythical war that we keep planning for. So another thing I want to emphasize about a lot of the observations I've had about our LISCO large-scale combat operations discussions is we are planning, our primary plan and emphasis on planning is for colossal system failure of our joint force to warfight together. That's what the primary medical plan seems to be, is like, hey, the sky is falling chicken little, nothing's going to work on the other warfighting functions, so we're just going to have to deal with these thousands of casualties. What generative AI model is giving us that? Like, where's that coming from? That's another sidebar discussion. But it's like, stop discounting the other warfighting functions because we're not in the room with them and don't understand their capabilities. We need to learn how to integrate. We need how to rapidly move casualties in a manner that will get the warfighters the ability to keep fighting. But also, if a true near peer or real fight kicks off, since we all want to focus on China, if we get in a fight with China, that's going to be a whole of government response because the homeland is going to be getting hit. And I'll tell you right now, from my work in the homeland space, wake up. You need red cells. You need good guys who think like bad guys. I'll help you out. Just don't put me on your FBI watch list, please. Like, we need good guys who are thinking like bad guys in the domestic space, because if we are truly worried about large-scale combat operations come with a certain set of problems that we have been very insulated for by our entire life, as we only have had one military direct attack on a dislocated state. There were some small saboteur things, but then two, and a terrorist attack, which, to be fair, Tom Clancy wrote about years before it happened. So, hope this was food for thought. I hope that some of this resonates, and this is a call to action for all my smart guys that I just saw at SOMA. I love seeing y'all. We need to get outside of our comfort zone and sit at tables that aren't in the soft community. A lot of you guys are doing great work. I know it. We just need to get further reach and access and bring the way we think across the board for the greater good. Because, to be fair, a soft medic, our thought processes are like they're next level, but we can't just stay in our little comfortable bubble. We need to get out there. And that's another thing. I kind of did it. I didn't do as well as I could have. I spent 4 years teaching for conventional police and all this other stuff. So yeah, I guess I got out of we have to get outside of our comfort zones into offices and planning areas that we can shape and influence those people with birds and stars on their chest. I was an E8. I had no power, but I had enough conversations with people that could shape and influence the next generation. So get out there, crush it, be a disruptor. Please reach out to me if you guys need anything. Got you. Let's chat. All right. Sam Patrick here, signing off for Splints and Whiskey. Final business plug. Again, if you're looking for any procurement help, supplies, medical supplies, anything in the medical realm, check out Life Autonomous Care Consultants, LACCINC.com. All right, Sam Patrick for Splints and Whiskey. Thanks for listening to my diatribe of word vomit, and hope it was worth your time. If not, cheers.